Getting rid of property tax in Texas is good for everybody in Texas. We'd be the first state to do that. We'd be the first state in the union to have only one primary model of funding government. Most every state uses at least two of the three, income, property, and sales. I'd argue, I guess, that we still have income until we get rid of the margins tax. But we'd be the first state. And I guess the other question that I get a lot is, well, what are you going to do when sales tax revenue drops, as they have now? That's the other problem we're really facing in Texas. Texas state budget is funded with sales tax, and the sales tax revenues for the last 6 months are down dramatically. What are you going to do? What's government going to do? And I said, government better start doing the same thing families and businesses do when revenue drops off. You know? What? Another thing I think we haven't talked about enough in using a sales tax versus a property tax to fund government is all of us would recognize, all of us that are living under that regime would recognize that in a property tax model, the government is able to manipulate both factors in the equation, getting the property tax product. Is that third grade math? Factor times factor equals product. They manipulate the value factor, they manipulate the rate factor to garner the product property tax revenue stream that they want. And it's very difficult for any of us as individuals to get any kind of accountability, because the elected officials say, what did they do? I dropped your property tax rate. I don't know what you're complaining about. And the appraisal board raises your rate, and they're appointed. So you're up a creek. If you go to a sales tax model, it's highly unlikely that elected officials will have any impact on the value of the products and services that are taxed. That's a broad market, and many other factors will influence that. The elected officials will not be able to manipulate that. So the only thing that they can manipulate in order to grow government spending, because that's really what this is about, right? It's not about what the rate is, it's not about what the appraised value is, it's about how much money government is spending. I got a copy of a paper out of Comal County earlier this week. Somebody's done a big write-up on all of the political races in Comal County, and one of the county judge candidates there has put in his ads a graph from 1932 to today of private sector payroll in this country versus government sector payroll in this country. And 2 years ago, the government sector payroll topped the private sector payroll. We either get government spending under control, or we're not going to stay a free and prosperous nation for long. So the problem here is not the rate, it is the spending. And the only people that are going to hold government accountable on spending is the voters, the taxpayers. Government is doing exactly what government does. It grows. And unless we have a transparent way to keep it accountable, it makes it very difficult for us to harness that growth. You put a sales tax in place, when the economy suffers, the government's revenue stream contracts, government will either cut spending or it will be forced to come to the taxpayer and do what every other member of the society does. Borrow money, go into debt, or cut their spending, or raise taxes. And all three of those require your approval.
Amen.
All three of those require your approval. So isn't that a better model for funding government than a property tax over which you have no control? So I think when we start to look at these fundamental principles, you really get a sense of there are things that we can do. You can get excited. Otherwise, you feel, if you're like my 20-year-old son, he's hanging his head saying, this sucks, life sucks. I'm 20 years old, I'm going to college, I'm incurring this college debt, mom and dad are incurring this college debt, and I get out and there's no jobs. But if you look at the principles that were laid down in that Constitution and you revisit what the proper role of government is, and we start to get back to those things, they're not new things. They're not Debra Medina things. They're probably not even We Texas 2010 things. They're things that Jefferson and Madison knew about. They're things, I say, that St. Augustine wrote about, and before that a man died on a cross for. We were created to be free, and we were created to have dominion over the land. And when we get back to that, we'll dream again in Texas. We'll be free and prosperous. We just have to have leaders who are courageous enough to have their allegiance to the people and not to the special interests that they're serving. We can get rid of property tax, but it means you've got to nominate for the Republican primary state representatives and state Senate candidates who are courageous enough to get that legislation through the House, and elect yourself a governor who will sign the bill when it gets to her desk. It has to be job one. It will give this economy the shot in the arm that it needs. We've got to talk about cutting spending in this state. We're facing a $16 billion budget shortfall. I am a registered nurse. I could talk health care till 6 o'clock in the morning without drawing a breath between now and then. It is not government's job to be providing health care.